In 1991, I was working in an early education program in the San Francisco public schools. The school served over 300 children aged 3 through the 3rd grade. You may recall that 1991 was the year of the Gulf War. Many images of that war were flashed on the TV screen each night. The black smoke coming from the burning oil fields, the eerie photos of soldiers, faces obscured by gas masks. The images that were seared into my brain were those of the many oil-soaked birds. In the face of so much death and destruction, I felt compelled to do something that was life-affirming. But what? That reality coincided with a teacher asking if he could cut a hole in a chain-link fence so that the children in his class could plant a vegetable garden. But we wanted to do something more than that, to offer children a chance to fall in love with nature and to deepen their connection to the earth. The vision that emerged was to create an environmental park on this barren, lifeless acre of land. By removing the asphalt, the symbolism of removing the asphalt, largely oil, was not lost on us. We began this adventure by looking around for models of what such a park on school grounds might look like. There were none. So we gathered together interested staff, parents, neighbors, and the larger community to imagine what might happen. As I looked through the photos that I had collected and that teachers had sent me in the intervening years after my retirement in 2001 until now, I began to really see how this park had transformed the children who used it. The photos confirmed my own perceptions, that the quality of their relationships had changed dramatically. They were engaging one another in very positive, complex ways. They had become comfortable in nature and were on a first-name basis with the trees, flowers, and all the plants that grew in that park. Children were introduced to a new world that was alive with birds, insects, and all manner of living things, and they were no longer afraid. Luther Standing Bear, a Native American tribal chief, had this to say: "There is a road in the hearts of all of us, hidden and seldom traveled, which leads to an unknown secret place. The old people came literally to love the soil, and they sat or reclined on the ground with a feeling of being close to the mothering power. That is why the old Indian sits upon the earth. For her, to sit or lie upon the ground is to think more deeply and feel more keenly. She can see more clearly into the mysteries of life and come closer in kinship to other lives about her." I'm going to take you on a journey of change. First of all, I'll tell you about all the changes that took place on an asphalt play yard, and then the many ways in which that change created possibilities for other amazing changes, the way we teach our children, and the profound changes in the children themselves. This is the story of a park that we built in a schoolyard in the middle of a large city. I worked in the San Francisco Unified School District for some 35 years. The last 11 were in the Marina District. The overwhelming number of children enrolled came from low-income families from throughout the city, and especially from Chinatown. This is a story of the dramatic transformation of a barren, lifeless schoolyard into an oasis of trees, plants, and animals. Because of that conversion of a space, there is the ongoing transformation, perhaps more subtle, but every bit as dramatic, in the children who themselves have been forever changed by their connections to and experiences in this park. The play yard was very stark and empty, not a tree or a bush in sight. Neither were there any insects or even weeds to be found. The play that occurred before the park was built consisted in mostly individual play, riding bikes or chasing games. As one teacher put it, we used to have to police kids on the yard. We always had to bring out balls and bikes and equipment. Often enough, children would argue about whose turn it was to ride a favorite bike. The role of the teacher was to resolve conflicts that arose, because there was really nothing much to engage the children unless it was totally adult-directed. It all started when that teacher asked if he could cut a hole in a chain-link fence so that the children in his class could plant a vegetable garden. The area in question was a very narrow strip of land, about 3 feet wide and 20 feet long. This was the only piece of land that had not been covered with asphalt, and it was not accessible to the children. That teacher's request to cut a hole in the fence started the transformation of the schoolyard. It was a transformation that lasted almost 6 years. Our children deserve better than an asphalt yard. We thought about all the reasons why children need beautiful and complex outdoor spaces. We thought about what May Sarton, an American poet, had said, "Childhood is a place as well as a time." Most of our children live in crowded, densely populated areas of the city, like Chinatown, with very few opportunities to experience nature. Children who live in urban areas and come from low-income families do not play outside because of concerns for their safety. They are more and more sitting in front of screens, whether TV, computer, or video games. For these reasons, this transformation seemed all the more important. All children deserve beauty in their lives. Our children were deprived. When on field trips to the local park near the school, most children would actually choose to sit on the hard ground and not the soft grass because of their deep discomfort with nature. I can remember taking our children to a wilderness park in search of caterpillars that we could take back to the school and watch them magically transform into cocoons and then butterflies. The children were captivated with the idea that a caterpillar could actually turn into a butterfly. They were nonetheless uneasy in this quiet place with so many trees. One usually bold and energetic boy came to me, put his hand in mine. "Miss Lynne, I'm scared." When I asked him why he was scared, he replied, "It was too quiet." If on one of these trips a child encountered an insect, his response would be to either run from it or squash it. How could we expect these children, as they grew up, to connect with the earth and the creatures of the earth if they experienced nature as a dangerous, hostile place, a place to be afraid of? The words of Gabriela Mistral, a Chilean poet, touched us deeply and gave a sense of urgency to the project. "Many things we need can wait. The child cannot. Now is the time her bones are formed, her mind developed. To her we cannot say tomorrow. Her name is today." What if we honor the children and this space by creating something really beautiful? We wanted to remove all the asphalt, allowing the earth to breathe again. And we wanted to nurture the children's appreciation of the earth through hands-on experiences with nature. As you can see from this photo of a small corner of the completed park, our school is in a very urban area surrounded by homes. Teachers began to imagine that even in the middle of the city, it would be possible to use the outdoors for learning, and that much teaching and learning could take place outside. Like the seed of a giant redwood tree, this idea germinated and grew. And so we set about to build a park. Because the school district lacked funds and the time to consider our park, we could not hope for their support. As a result, we reached out to the larger community to dream with us and to imagine how this park might look. Many, many volunteers opened their hearts not only to dream, but also to help us build this park. We decided that our park should have a butterfly garden, a play structure so that children could climb and exercise, trees, an amphitheater for children to perform, bike paths, a vegetable garden, a composting area where waste could be transformed into rich soil, a sand play area, and art terraces for children to do art outside. Experts in bees, butterflies, birds, trees, and flowering plants came together to meet with the staff, parents, and community members to help us decide which plants would attract wildlife and provide shade and quiet spaces for the children. As you can see from this photo, the changes we envisioned did not happen all at once. As a matter of fact, the worse things looked, the more I smiled. But eventually, the long gestation period was richly rewarded. The words of Lao Tzu seem appropriate. From wonder into wonder, existence opens. Here, you can see the trees are in place, but not yet fully grown. The mature park offers so much beauty, so many secret places. These are the raised beds that were built so that the children could easily plant and care for vegetables. We welcomed the birds, insects, and butterflies that made the park their home. Don't miss the grasshopper on this plant. The play structure was well used and the children loved the sand beneath it, especially when it was combined with water. Gradually, our children lost their fear of wild things and learned to respect them as an important part of the local ecosystem. Children brought great observation skills to the completed park and were often the first to notice changes. The hawk that took up residence in the large oak tree. From his perch in the tree, the hawk feasted on mice who also took up residence in the park. This is one of many slugs found busily eating the bok choy and other green leafy vegetables. The cocoon, soon to emerge as a beautiful butterfly, was a perfect metaphor for the transformation of our school. The staff discovered the importance of blurring boundaries between the classroom indoors and the outdoors, and gradually the outdoors became critical for learning. The complexity of the garden was a perfect match for the innovative curriculum that the staff was beginning to embrace and develop. This new curriculum, inspired by the work of educators both in the United States and in Reggio Emilia, Italy, is called project-based learning. A project is an in-depth investigation of a topic worth learning about. This research is usually undertaken by a small group of children within a class, or sometimes by the whole class. The goal of the project is to learn more about the topic, rather than to find the right answer to questions posed. Projects encourage children and teachers to investigate topics of interest to them and to go an inch wide and a mile deep instead of an inch deep and a mile wide. When learning emerges from the children's immediate environment, there are many possibilities for such learning to occur and for adults to get in touch with the processes children go through as they begin to make sense of their world. I have seen wonderful projects outdoors on seeds, bees, trees, insects. Just about any topic can be a project if it is something worth learning about, concrete, of interest to the children, and if first-hand experiences are readily available. For instance, a young boy began to notice birds landing in a tree outside his classroom window. His curiosity was aroused. What did they eat? Where do they sleep? With the children, the teacher created a web of information to assess their existing knowledge about birds. The students made bird feeders with the assistance of a grandfather who was handy with simple tools. More birds came to the trees. Fascinated, the children began to think more about birds. They created bird songs, sketched a variety of birds on an excursion to the local zoo, and created collages of birds. They mapped the different varieties of birds they observed in the neighborhood. These children became steeped in birds. Quiet places to sit and listen to stories are always a favorite activity. Notice the attention of these children as they learn about the seeds and the birds that eat them. They predicted what foods birds might like to eat, and then they tested their theories. Birds were woven into every aspect of the curriculum in this class. Another project involved creating a vegetable garden. After a trip to Golden Gate Park's children's garden, the children returned to the school and documented what they'd learned, as well as what they already knew about gardens. This chart is a result of an extended conversation with the children to explore what they already knew and what they had learned. Plants need water. They need sun. My grandma has a garden. You don't step on plants. If you do, you will be in big trouble. Children met together and voted very democratically on which vegetables they wanted to plant. And they decided on corn and pumpkin. A chart was created for the children to list the new words they were learning. This was especially important for the many children for whom English was a second language. Children learned about seeds and their many different shapes and sizes. The next two photos, the garden is being organized for planting. Children created a list of responsibilities. Who would plant? Who would water? Who would pull weeds and pick up debris? Through first-hand experiences, they learned about the growth patterns of corn, tomatoes, bok choy, and many other vegetables. Children also learned how to prepare this food and how it tasted coming fresh from the earth. Insects enjoyed the corn before it was picked. Here, a teacher shows the children how to spray plants using a soap mixture as an insect deterrent. Children are hand-pollinating the pumpkin because the seeds were planted a bit late in the season and the bees had left the garden. They learned how to differentiate between the male and female plant and transferred the pollen successfully. Pumpkins followed. At the same time that the vegetable garden was being planted, the classroom pet, Goldie, died. The children were very sad about this. For many of them, this little goldfish was their first experience with death. They decided to bury Goldie in the vegetable garden where it would fertilize the vegetables. They then decided to name the garden after the deceased goldfish. That decision was quickly followed by the making of a sign designating the garden the fish garden. Children learn quickly when a tomato is ripe and sweet and when it is too green. Through the vegetable garden, the children learn many things. Where does food come from? How do we care for growing things? How do we cook and eat healthy foods? What creatures in the garden might want to eat the vegetables? It teaches good nutrition at an early age. These teachings are very important, especially where the percentage of obese children aged 6 to 11 increased from 7% in 1980 to nearly 18% in 2012. Here you see the bok choy is ready for harvesting. The children celebrate the harvest and prepare for cooking. This beautiful broccoli plant is almost as big as the little girl who harvested it. And here the corn is ready for harvesting and eating. In these slides, you see children using moisture gauges to see whether it's time for the plants to be watered. Children learn when to water, how much water is enough, but not too much. The children appreciate being treated with respect and given real tools with which to do their very real work. These photos also show the many ways in which the children work together to accomplish a task. The clipboard has become a well-used support in the garden, whether drawing a picture or taking notes. Here they are matching footprints embedded in the pavement with those on their worksheets. You can see from these photos that children take their assignments very seriously. The clipboard really supports children as they write and draw outside. Another tool that has proved very useful to the children is a magnifying glass. Can you find the caterpillar in this photo without the aid of a magnifying glass? Children are captivated by the small creatures that frequent the garden. They are no longer afraid of the natural world, and it would be quite unusual for them to squash an insect that they might find. Here, children are looking intently at the worms they are studying. See how gently these children are holding the worms. They have learned just how useful worms are for healthy soil and are careful not to injure them. There have been many opportunities for deep friendships to develop in this beautifully complex garden. Activities planned by teachers often encourage children to work together. Here, 2 boys are taking turns watering the vegetables. These girls are enjoying the same task. An important job is making sure that any trash is put into the proper receptacles. Through thoughtful planning, the teacher makes sure that it will take 2 children working together to plant the seeds. This is especially important for making sure that children with special needs can actively participate, knowing that a complex play space offers, among other things, physical challenges and an opportunity for children to test their prowess. We made sure to include a wide variety of possibilities. There are raised walkways that enable children to practice balance. Large rocks are strategically placed. These encourage children to test their gross motor skills. Challenging, yes. Impossible? No. Here, 2 boys are testing not just their coordination, but also their bravery. You can see that one boy is offering his friend a great deal of encouragement. And now the challenge. Can he? Will he jump? Both boys are very happy with their successful efforts. After the big boys jumped successfully, all of the children wanted to turn. Soon, what was initially a very big challenge has become enormous fun. Not only does the park contain an art terrace complete with art supplies including easels, chalk, glue, and paints that enable the children to express their learning through art, but several art pieces have been permanently installed in the park. As it happened, a large redwood tree in the neighborhood needed to be cut down to make room for housing. Wanting to see this tree put to some good use, a community friend asked if we could use it. Of course, we said yes, and we hired a sculptor to create 3 totems made from this tree. Everyone's favorite is the dragon. In our school community, where about 50% of the children are of Chinese ancestry, the image of the dragon, a legendary figure in Chinese mythology, a creature with auspicious powers to control water, rainfall, hurricanes, and floods, and a symbol of power, strength, and good luck, was an image that we really wanted to include. Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul alike. Those words by 19th century naturalist John Muir remind us that a connection with nature feeds our souls. It is in nature that imaginations soar. Observing our children and noticing the many ways in which their imaginations are stimulated convinces us that this is so. We captured this series of photos of a child playing with water and some natural materials that she had found. You can see that she has created a delicious concoction. Notice the creative use of the magnolia leaf. Maybe soup? Too good to be experienced alone, she invites her friends to partake in this feast. Scenes like this are reenacted every day. The raw materials in the park, of which there are many, invite creativity and innovative play and put children in touch with nature and with their own imaginations. We share a biology with plants and animals. We have co-evolved with other natural creatures for millions of years, and yet so many people are afraid of nature that it has become a recognized mental disease, biophobia, or nature deficit disorder. This unprecedented breakdown of the fundamental bond between us and all living systems has disastrous consequences for our health and for planetary well-being. Wendell Berry, an American poet and champion of the environment, put it this way: our children no longer know how to read the great book of nature from their own direct experiences, or how to interact creatively with the seasonal transformation of the planet. They seldom learn where water comes from or where it goes. We no longer coordinate our human celebrations with the great liturgy of the heavens. Children need time to be away from adults or to believe that they have found their own private spaces, whether with friends or alone. These children have created an outdoor dining area where they can strengthen relationships, emulate the adults in their lives, and practice the art of being grown up. The forested area at one end of the park offers many opportunities for children to be alone or to be alone together. This is one of my favorite photos. The specimen oak, named Grandpa Bob, was planted 2 years before I retired. It was not big enough for children to climb. Now it is plenty big enough. Why, you might wonder, would an oak tree be named Grandpa Bob? That is an interesting story among many. One of our volunteers was a gentleman who owned a landscape contracting business in San Francisco. On this particular day, he was standing in the far corner of the play yard, measuring for changing the grade. He received a phone call and the news that his father had just passed away. Soon after, he told me that he wanted to donate a specimen oak tree, Quercus agrifolia, in memory of his father, Bob. His children created a wooden plaque for their grandpa, Bob. Every child at the school knows that tree is Grandpa Bob, and the plaque still hangs from a large branch. The presence of butterflies, bees, birds, and yes, worms in this garden teach beauty and reverence for all life. If you are thinking a year ahead, sow a seed. If you are thinking 10 years ahead, plant a tree. If you are thinking 100 years ahead, educate the children. We believe that mind and body are deeply intertwined, and that we are not separate from nature, but a part of nature. To the extent that we are out of touch with nature, we are out of touch with ourselves. We have so much to learn from the indigenous peoples who were the first peoples to walk our land. Here is yet another quote from Luther Standing Bear that says it all. "We are of the soil, and the soil is of us. We love the birds and the beasts that grow with us on this soil. They drank the same water as we did and breathed the same air. We are all one in nature. Believing so, there was in our hearts a great peace and loving kindness for all living, growing things." We planted a seed. It took 6 years to germinate. Before I retired in 2001, a group of us created the San Francisco Green Schoolyard Alliance. That name was recently changed to Education Outside. I'm very proud of the fact that the leadership of that group remains intact over 15 years. The intent of Education Outside is to enable other schools in the district to transform their schoolyards and to make sure that they would be sustained over time. Within the first few years, a city bond measure was passed that gave $14 million towards the design and construction of green schoolyards. Now, in San Francisco, there are 84 schools that have greened their schoolyards, one of the largest green schoolyard systems of any school district in the country, and the numbers keep growing. After my retirement in 2001, I worried that we had created an amazing environment for children in a context that could not support it. Through their work with these school communities, Education Outside also realized that in order to thrive, green schoolyards need dedicated advocates, an impossibility for many schools with limited resources. They came up with a bold and transformative solution. Why not create a surface core of young people who are passionate about nature, the environment, social justice, education, and science? So in 2011, they launched the Core for Education Outside. This service corps of college graduates makes a 2-year commitment to work in the schools and to promote science, math, sustainable living, and a love of the earth. In August 2015, the Corps members were assimilated into the AmeriCorps program, which means that a huge federal grant will be put in place in San Francisco for school gardens and an AmeriCorps staff dedicated to sustaining them. I couldn't be more delighted. I'd like to end with this short inspirational video that shows just how much things have transformed since that first school built a park on an asphalt play yard.
We have just tipped the balance where we are now more urban population than a rural population. We have nature deficit disorder. We have kids that are completely disaffected by the natural world, spending tremendous amounts of time in front of a screen. Our national science scores are weak. How are we going to solve these problems? Education Outside is a nonprofit organization working with our school district. We have over 80 school gardens in our city, and about 50 of those are really outdoor classrooms. And so our aim is to activate them. So we launched the first National Service Corps of young college grads to bring science alive in the outdoor classroom.
I am setting up for a 5th grade class. We're going to dissect the Easter lilies, take them apart, learn about the flower parts. Come on in.
We are increasingly living in a world where science is more and more important, and science is being taught less and less.
Get this one. This one has
STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, just bedrock important for our students. In San Francisco Unified School District, Education Outside will be the S in STEM.
The flowers are beautiful for one reason. They're beautiful and they smell good so that they attract who?
Out here in this space where things are so dynamic, things are happening, the ecosystem is at work, and students are engaging with that world in a really hands-on way.
How do you tell which one's a male? The female has a pistol. Oh. The ovaries, like some over here. I mean, this is the male and this is the female.
Oh my gosh, it's just like puberty.
It is.
I just had to bring it up.
It's
awkward.
Right, but
I'm
anyway.
just standing there.
It's beyond reading and writing. It's beyond bubbling. It's experiential based, which I think really bodes well for whole learning, holistic learning.
We see a tremendous need and potential for the Corps for Education Outside.
We as educators should know the science behind some of the techniques like making a vinaigrette.
We train them and they commit to working full-time for 2 years to transform public school communities.
We're always looking at science standards and seeing how we can match those standards to some sort of gardening lesson or a cooking lesson.
You've emulsified it now. When it breaks, it means that
And then we flew back from that.
I just taught my kinder and first graders about solid, liquid, and gas.
Different ways to measure, tablespoons or teaspoons.
We work not only teaching in the outdoor classroom, science standards, literacy standards, math standards, we also work on sustainability for the school. So we're doing composting efforts, we're leading energy reduction campaigns, we're organizing transportation campaigns to bring the community together around their school.
And what you see behind me is the rainwater harvesting cistern. So water falls onto the roof of one of our bungalow classrooms and gets filtered out and goes into the cistern where it's stored, and it can be used for students to water the garden manually. A lot of the upper grade standards involve the water cycle, where it comes from and how we use water and what happens with water pollution, and what the benefits are of storing water on site to use to water the garden.
To have education outside as part of our school changed the garden dramatically. Suddenly it wasn't just an aesthetic place to look at, it was actually a place where children were going to learn, they were going to use it. Now the difference is that every child at the school is using the garden.
Good job, yogurt cups, very good. Yogurt cups in the trash can over there, very good. Good job, bud.
So basically, they're scooping the food into that bucket so they can put it in the compost to make soil for our garden.
And how about straws? Do we put straws in the compost? No. Good job, out of either one.
The Corps educates students in the outdoor classroom. It educates teachers through professional development. And unlike a garden coordinator, a Corps member focuses on changing the culture in the school instead of just providing the service of instruction in the outdoor classroom.
A lot of our kids have limited opportunities to go on trips to Yosemite or even the beach. So this is some of their only deep connections our students get to have with the natural world. What creatures live in these trees that eat the pine cones, Emily?
We're solving very big problems here by introducing students to the natural world, introducing students to their food system, introducing students to science in an engaging and interesting way. It's just, to me, as obvious as reading, writing, and arithmetic.
We always look at data, we look at test scores, we look at instructional time, we look at discipline. This program only focuses on the positive in every sense of the word. It builds community, it builds knowledge about science, it builds a passion for sustainability, and it's a great connector for child, school, family.
We're growing healthy communities.
We're growing curious minds.
We're growing kids who care.
We're growing enthusiastic learners.
We're growing awareness of the water cycle.
We're growing scientists and critical thinkers.
We're growing living laboratories.
We're growing kids who like getting dirty.
We're growing lettuce.
We are growing bok choy.
We're also growing broccoli.
We are growing students that appreciate their local environment.
We're growing the next generation of environmental stewards.
We're growing.